Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, I guess I'll get started. Yes, first of all, thank you everyone for coming. This meeting will be recorded. So if people will trickle in later, they get to see what happens. Yes, for those of you that this is their first time being here, my name is Ethan Kang, current president of Informs at Mississippi State University. And today we are very pleased to have Miandra James, the MBA and PMP, come over and speak today from Walmart in Arkansas, like the headquarters. Yes, and I'll give her an introduction, and then we are going to let her present her content. So, yeah, Miandra James graduated at Mississippi State with her bachelor's in 2017 and her MBA in 2018. Got her PMP in 2021. Yes, at JB Hunt, she worked in 3 different roles as a logistics engineer 1 and 2, data science product owner 1 and 2, manager 1 and 2, at specifically the enterprise analytics product owners division. And then now she's a Walmart senior manager of product portfolio strategy. And today she's going to detail her career and her undergrad journey, graduate journey, and a whole lot of other things. So thank you so much, Miandra, for coming. And yeah, I'll give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here, y'all. I think so. I'm watching how many people are in the chat. It seems like right now it's manageable. So please, if you guys have questions, like feel free to raise your hand or kind of like speak up. Otherwise, of course, we can answer any at the end. I mean, it's just kind of my life, and I'm happy to share with you guys. I know that you all have different insights and backgrounds. So I hope it's helpful, but feel free to ask questions to make it helpful for you and make it worth your time. All right, well, background, just a little bit about me so you know who I am. I'm actually from Starkville, Mississippi, so you might have heard of it. It's kind of a small town, but now I live in Northwest Arkansas. So like Ethan said, the Northwest Arkansas area, I say Fayetteville area because that's where people are more familiar with, but it's where the University of Arkansas is, Walmart, JB Hunt, which is trucking and logistics, and Tyson. So you know from your like chicken and meat and whatever, all those headquarters are also here. So it's kind of a busy area, even though you wouldn't necessarily think it. And because it's a lot of little towns that kind of have gotten like almost smushed together is kind of how I describe it. So it's kind of like a bigger area, but a bunch of little towns. People just call it Northwest Arkansas rather than like a certain town name. It's kind of how it goes. So if you ever use our airport, you never know if it's going to be labeled Bentonville, Fayetteville, or Northwest Arkansas. It's truly, you never know. But I have a little family. My husband's name is Timothy. We have a son. He's 17 months old. So if you hear anything, it's probably him playing out there. And we actually have another baby on the way. So in August, we'll have another little boy joining the family. So we're growing. I went to Mississippi State too, which I'm sure you're aware of. I got my industrial engineering degree in 2017, and then I did list like a couple of things here that maybe are relatable depending on what you're doing in IE. But I was one of the IE reps back when Dr. Usher was the dean, and I worked as a K-12 student outreach worker, so big on robotics and like the K-12 engineering outreach that we do here, science fairs, all of that. I co-opted at Caterpillar up in Corinth. And then I did do the engineering study abroad in Italy. So variety of like little things, maybe our paths have crossed or we've done similar things. So I love to hear about it. I did stick around, get my MBA. And during that, I did the project management role for EcoCar in grad school. So a little bit about kind of what I did in school. Starting at JB Hunt. So one of the things I looked for out of school was a rotation program. As y'all probably, some of you have a lot of experience already, but for me, I wanted to say like, okay, what are some different opportunities? I wanted to start somewhere that I could try some different skills, learn some different skills. And that was something JB Hunt offered. So I found that really appealing. They do an 18-month program where you're in 3 different roles, 6 months in each role. And then after that, when you graduate, you get placed or kind of help pick what team you're interested in based on how your talents kind of played out. So started in ICS pricing. So for JB Hunt, they have a variety of divisions. So we have trucking, which is kind of where it started. We own trucks, we move stuff for you, you pay us. It then expanded to intermodal, which would be like trucks and trains, to put it simply. So JB Hunt, the founder, was like, how do we make this bigger? And at first people were like, you're kind of crazy. Like that's a competitor, because trains were competition to the trucks. But it's actually now the biggest business unit at JB Hunt. And it's more efficient and it's more green, it's less carbon. So then there's intermodal. Then there's DCS, which is dedicated fleets. So people that pay us for longer contracts, like 5+ years. Where we specialize our trucks and run it, and people that drive those trucks are specialized to do whatever that job is. So it could be stocking fridges, it could be picking up chickens from a farm, whatever. And then we have brokerage. So brokerage is other people that own trucks, whether they only own one or a variety of them, and then we pay them. So kind of like an Uber, but for trucking. So between all those business units, there's a lot to learn and do at Hunt, and then obviously all the different supporting type information. So all that to say, I started in ICS, which is our brokerage, that Uber for trucking I was telling you about, in the pricing division. And so for that, we were looking at, are we pricing well? Like, are we doing what we think we're doing? How do we better look at the data that hits different markets? Like, do we need to have different strategies? How do we account for seasonality? And so did some of the analytics there. Then moved on to final mile engineering, which is kind of a subset of that DCS dedicated fleet that I was telling you about. So final mile is big and bulky home delivery. So think refrigerators, patios, things like that. And so those get interesting in an IE sense, where not only are you doing trucking and logistics, but you also need to think about time studies and how you're delivering something, because the driver is also now going to be unloading and installing a refrigerator possibly. And so how does that go into your routing? So moved into final mile, and then for me wanted to try something a little more technical, do something that would stretch me, and did work on basically our CMS tool, our customer management tool, which was Microsoft Dynamics, which is where we stored all our sales information, kind of had our data pipeline throughout the variety of the different broker or different units that I was just telling you about. So on each of these slides, to hopefully make them helpful. And again, if you have questions or they're not helpful, please help me make this helpful for you. But I kind of put, what did I learn in it? And then what did I need to do to work in that area? So for technical, a lot of it was growth in data. So how do you think about data? How do we query these different data sets? When the data is a mess, where do you find the connection points, and how do you clean it? And how do you put the right asterisks when you're like, hey, FYI, this is what we pulled, but here's the things you need to know about that. Starting to look at how do we design for a customer where you're talking to a company that now you need to say, okay, for Whirlpool, that's one of JB Hunt's huge connection points, but Whirlpool washing machines, how do we make sure that we're accounting for their needs? So part of our contract is wherever their top 10 building locations are in the nation each week, we need to service a certain amount of times a week. So then that's a whole logistical puzzle. So understanding customer needs, starting to get some coding skills. And as y'all know, the more coding you learn, the more easy it is to pick up other kinds. So doing that. And then agile development practices, which is really where I loved it. So you'll see that kind of as it goes on, is really enjoyed the more project management and agile side of it. For working skills, this is kind of where I'll sit on, because you can take or leave all the rest of this information, but the way you work ends up being how you get to move on and change and roll. So I think one of the biggest understatements or understated benefits of a rotation program, or any kind of role that you change jobs a lot, so internships, co-ops, rotation programs, excuse me, I don't know, variety of other things, is understanding different management styles and what you need out of them. So in the rotation program, I had one main manager and a mentor, but then every role I was in had a different manager. And so you start to learn hey, I really worked well with this type of feedback, or this type of feedback wasn't good for me, and I now need to have a hard conversation with my boss and tell them I need this other type of feedback, or I need to adapt in a way to change that. And so starting to think critically about what you need out of management and getting that, because the manager should be hoping that you're doing a good job and wanting you to succeed and supporting you, but sometimes they don't know what you need, and you might know what you need. So especially for me in some of these roles where you're only there for 6 months, you need to meet at least weekly, because you want that touch point and feedback and to be hey, am I on the right track? So anyway, working skills number one, I think, and it's something that you can do anywhere, but think about how is your management style working with you? Does that work well for you, or is there something different you need? And don't be afraid to figure out how to have a conversation to ask for what you need in that sense. Giving yourself grace and space to learn. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's so easy. I'm sure all of y'all are also high performers, overachievers. It's easy to beat yourself up, especially when you've been in a role 2-3 months and you feel like you don't know what you're doing yet. I would say minimum, and I've got 6 years of work experience this summer, so I'm still learning. Minimum 6 months before you even start to feel comfortable in a role. And switching roles into Walmart was just a confirmation again of that. So in the rotation program, it's kind of funny because as soon as you start to feel comfortable, it's like, okay, well, here's the next role. So give yourself space, especially as you guys do internships and co-ops, go there and try to do your best, and also know that you're a human and it's going to take you a little bit of time to learn. Networking. I don't say there are no dumb questions, because of course there are some questions. There's a fine line here of like between Google it and then also ask the question so you don't waste your time trying to figure something out. Like there is a line here, but if you are going to a team and you're not asking any questions, people are going to wonder like what's going on, because it doesn't make sense that you would know everything. People have to ask questions. So ask questions, find the people that are your advocates, find connections, and then stay connected with them over time, because building that bigger network obviously helps. I know that's an age-old concept, but it's still true. And then I think one of the things that's helped me over time is documenting processes. So a lot of times you'll go somewhere that has a lot of tribal knowledge, or everyone knows that you do X and then Y and then Z. But if you're just new to the team, that process of XYZ is very new and kind of complicated. And if you're learning it and you're able to like write it down or do it in a way that makes it helpful for you, one, it's helpful for you, but two, it's helpful for any other onboarding. And three, like if you can start to document that and help make that a known process or a shared piece of information, it's a bit of a legacy you can leave behind, and it helps that team in the long run. So it's kind of a win-win situation. So that's something I did a lot that I think helped. I'll keep going, but if there are any questions on this one, it's okay if not, totally, but just want to keep going if there aren't. Okay, so after the rotation program, I started as a product owner. So this is basically did the rotation and then switched into a new role again after that. Some people go back to rotations they're already on. It just depends on the person and the roles that are open and what you're interested in. But switched into product ownership. The data science team at Hunt was looking for some type of project management need. They didn't really know what. This was actually the first official product owner role on the data science team, which was part of the thing that really drew me to it. I thought it sounded really interesting. And the endless opportunity for improvement when you start at zero is kind of fun. I'm sure all of y'all feel that as IEs. So started as a product owner. A lot to learn because I wasn't a data science type person. It's kind of funny. I think if they would have, I definitely didn't ever think I'd be in data science. But then when the role opened and it was a great manager and it was a great opportunity, I did take it. But had to learn about how does this data science team work? What are the people doing day to day? What are the different roles and how do they interact? And what are their ways of working? And the team, a lot of the team members were great people that were very smart, but they were very resistant to like a new process or someone coming in and telling them how to do it. So I think I'll talk about that in your working skills, but like how do you start to influence an organization that has a set way of working, knowing that it's going to be painful maybe at first, but still be positive in the long run. So learnings, I also said like how to use a project management toolbox. I think if you're too rigid, because there's a lot of right ways to do something, it can turn people off. And so especially on a team like this that was kind of resistant to change, being really open to like, out of all these different tools and techniques and like options, where can I get buy-in and slowly inch into maybe a better way of working? Advocating and working for primarily technical teams, but you've got primarily non-technical stakeholders. That's just a way of communication. So how do you get the buy-in and speak the technical language, but still be able to go to the business and say, here's actually what's going on, or here's why we need more space, or this is why this isn't going to be the timeline you think. So communication, you all know this, your IEs, and then stakeholder management across various teams. So in the data science world, at Hunt specifically, we had very different budgets where some teams like basically kind of bought 1 to 2 data scientists per year. So then that was like, they had that much allocation, whereas some teams like 25% of their budget kind of fluidly went into this 2 quarters of the year. So like, then you had to go with not only how are we prioritizing projects in the space and by priority and like what's going on, but also how do we think about the budget? And then if we need to have hard budget conversations, what does that look like? So I think that was a whole nother way of learning and way of working that we had to think about. Skills in general, just adaptability and flexibility, knowing that a lot of people have a really good opinion and thought process and probably have very valid feelings about why they don't want to change what they're doing, while still knowing sometimes change is going to be inevitable and we need to move it forward. So collaborating across a lot of different working styles, working personalities, big personalities, and getting that buy-in. Remembering that everyone has something you can learn from. I think it's really easy sometimes to just have a hard day and be like, this person's hard to work with and I don't really want to. But everyone has something you can learn from. And honestly, a lot of times the people that have the most critiques, if you listen to them, there's sometimes people that just want to complain, but there are also a lot of times that people have critiques that if you listen to them are very valid. And if you can work around them, they're going to become bigger advocates for you in the process in the long run. And then a continuous improvement mindset. I joke about this because I am so continuous improvement. My husband said, I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was a good wake up call for me. He was like, sometimes you're so like keen on making it better that it's like, it feels like we never like improved. And so I think that was good self-awareness for me of making sure that you celebrate the wins along the way too. But I think making sure that you're thinking about how do we make this better, helps you slowly move forward. Like the amount of space that we covered in several years. Humility, you're going to be wrong sometimes, and sometimes things are going to try it and it's not going to work out, and you're going to get such better buy-in if you're like, hey, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, we don't have to keep doing it, or we can do feedback. I put retros. I'm sure y'all are familiar with the agile processes, but retros or retrospectives are a way of looking back on oftentimes a sprint or some time frame recently of what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we improve. There's a variety of other ways to run it. There's a lot of ways, but in general, I really love retros. I think they're the most important process, and I think doing them not just at the working tactical level, but doing them at the process level or the team level even, of, hey, in the last quarter, what went well, what didn't, like, did we meet enough? Did we have enough team building? Like, if you start to really be open to a lot of feedback, and run retros in a way that you're like, I want you to give me the tough information because we can't change without it, you start to create kind of an openness with the team and you work forward and make some really big improvements. So I'm very big advocate for retros. In this process, I put leveling up. I got my PMP during this process because I knew it was something I was interested in, wanted to invest in that before having children and kind of before making the next step, which actually was part of how I moved into management, was kind of over years of proving myself here and then really studying and wanting to get better. It kind of was right place, right time, right things that I'd done at the same time. So a variety of factors there. All right, I'll move on unless there are any questions. Okay, becoming a manager. So switched into management after working as a PO for a couple of years. Like I said, you know, there's some parts of right time, right place, some parts of just like having the right advocates, of building the right network, of doing something new since I was the first PO and I really loved it and really cared about it and really was investing in the team. It was something I was able to do. But it didn't mean I actually hired everyone. So my team actually, and so we supported advanced analytics, which means that we supported data science, optimization, which is basically the linear programming type team, and advanced analytics. So like basically Power BI, dashboards, visualization, SQL, like how the tables are set up, data architecture. So anything in advanced analytics fell under my POs, basically. We had over 40 projects or products running at a time, and my team ended up being about 7 people. So we started with 5 and hired 2 more product owners. And so with that, I think we hit 3 different generations. We had Gen Z, then millennials, and then Gen X. We had a variety of different like working level experiences, different job experiences. And so when we first did this, those team product owners had not been on the same team. It was all the like data science ones reported data science, optimization reported optimization, and you get the idea. But moving them all into the same team meant, how do you take these people that help service a specific group and make a team and a culture with that group of people that is beneficial to each other? So how are you knowledge sharing, even though day to day you're not necessarily working closely with each other? So challenges, just like different ways of working. You had very different perspectives. We had different generations, a lot of differences. We had matrix organization. So that means that under RVP, like a lot of the analytical people, each of those analytical pockets I listed had their own manager. The software engineers had their own manager. The product owners had their own manager. So as you can imagine, if I said, hey, the product owners want to change this process, that means I need to get like 7 to 8 different managers bought in on the fact that I'm about to change this process. And my product owners now, I need to get these various teams that are like 80 different people at this point to now try a new process and adjust. So matrix organization, good, bad, or indifferent. There's opinions on it, but adds complexity as far as how you communicate across. Creating a culture. How do you even start to how do you make friends out of people that weren't necessarily working together, and collaborating across information and standardizing processes without it just telling people what to do all the time. And then we also had the extra challenge of remote and in-person teams. So we had people that lived in Michigan and Florida, and then some that were at corporate in Northwest Arkansas. And then we also had return to office and COVID changes. So just like a lot of different things to learn how to manage through, especially as a new manager. So I put 3 books at the top. I like to read, and I wanted to caveat this, like some people don't like to read, and that is totally okay. Like there are podcasts and YouTube videos and a million other resources in the world, and documentaries and whatever. Personally, I like to read, but also so I'm putting these up here, but it's not even necessarily the best way to learn. It's just whatever works for you. But the Coaching for Performance book was just like top 10 incredible books for me as a manager, where it really helped me understand what are questions. Something that's really interesting about moving into management is it's no longer about how you contribute to the organization, but how you enable others to contribute to the organization. And so that book gave some really good questions, some good ways to think about coaching and having thoughts with people and enabling them to do what needed to happen. The other 2 were just interesting thought books. To Sell as Human, which basically kind of teaches you that everything is selling, and how to kind of influence in that way, and Never Split the Difference is actually by someone who works in the FBI doing negotiations, that talks a lot about how do you negotiate with different people and what are mindsets within that. And so they might not seem like a data science product owner book, but they're really good mindset human books that I found helpful. I think, and I put this little growth plant thing, but basically the big thing I think about management is just how are you growing yourself and finding your own blind spots? Because I know I still have them. I still have a lot of room to grow as a person. But if you're not growing yourself, you're going to have an unhealthy team, period, and as a manager. And so finding mentors, finding ways that you want to learn. So like I said, I liked books, but there are so many other options. Networking. So finding other people that were new to management or had been in management for a long time, things like that was really helpful, because when you have to do something difficult, like have a hard conversation with someone or have a performance evaluation, getting advice can be really helpful as you're preparing for that. And then you'll hear me say this a couple times, but assuming positive intent. It's very hard sometimes when you work with people, but if you assume that most people have positive intent, it's going to just make your workday so much better. It's going to make you speak to people better. And so it's just kind of a good thing to live by, I would say. As far as learning, I kind of mentioned this, changing from you being the contributor to trying to help other people. Having to protect a team, but also still influence them to do hard things when they need to do it. Being able to manage through different company politics. Maybe sometimes you don't always agree with the politics, but now you're a manager, you need to decide how you approach that. And then having the humility to know sometimes you're wrong, and a lot of times your team also has better ideas than you, and so that's got to be okay. For working skills, I kind of boil it down to reflection and resilience. I think back to what I was saying, if you have blind spots or you're not working on yourself, you're just going to do a bad job. So trying to take the time to reflect and say, what are the gaps I need to fill personally to enable my team better? finding those resources. And then resilience. So one thing I found really helpful, so I specifically put it here, was discussion planners. I'd never heard of this until I was management. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but if you Google discussion planner, there's a million different templates online, and they really help you have hard conversations. So if you ever know you're going into something with literally whoever, even your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, it helps you map, what do you want to say? What are the actual feelings in it? And really have like a logical conversation. And so I think as a manager, for me, that was one of the things that was really stressful, was how do you have hard conversations and be honest? Because it's important for your whole team and their morale to be able to correct something if it's not going well, but it's also still hard because you're a human and you have your own emotions and feelings and don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. So discussion planners, if you've never heard of this, look it up. They're amazing. And then kind of some of this other stuff that I said about like political challenges, performance conversations. And then I think a big part of it too is managing your own emotional state, because you don't want to be in a place that you're going to lash out at someone because you haven't taken care of yourself or your needs or your space. And so being aware of that as a manager, they did some study recently, I heard it quoted again today, that basically said managers have more impact on people's mental health than their doctors and their therapists, which I totally believe after working. So just as a heads up, if you're ever a manager, it's a big responsibility. So take it seriously and work on yourself. And I think it'll help a lot. Okay, I'll keep going. Feel free again to pause me for questions, or else we can do it at the end. Move to Walmart. So so in this middle of all of the management stuff, I had my first baby, and it was wonderful. And I really realized, like, your career is 40 some years long, depends on how long you work, but I knew in this phase, something that was really important to me and my priorities was being a mom. And so I wanted to take a step back from management for a little bit, go to an individual contributor role, do something that I knew that I liked and was good at, learn something new, but do it in a place that I had space to be home at night. And not that it was like I was never home with a management role, but I had a lot more mental space going into that role, and I wanted to change it up. So moved to Walmart this last summer. It'll be a year in June. Into a manager of product portfolio strategy. I knew I wanted to keep doing products, but wanted to learn something new. It's a fancy way of saying that basically in my current role, I'm supporting one of the product VPs who supports pickup and delivery and returns. So I help a lot with how do we strategically plan for quarters, for years, for further out in the next fiscal year. How do we support the team and how they're working collaboratively across a lot of different teams? How are we thinking about our priorities? Are we doing that the right way? Are we communicating that right way? It's kind of a jack of all trades role, in the sense that sometimes I'm designing an all hands and making sure there's a survey that goes out. And then there's times that I'm working on like NDA sensitive strategic projects. So it's really kind of a broad role. As far as learnings, I think the changes that I kind of listed here. So it was a big change in a balanced ratio, maybe, of strategic to tactical, of how do we do things versus what is the strategy behind them, to primarily a strategic role of how are we thinking about the big picture here. And then changing my coworker level from anywhere from new hires to like senior VPs to now I pretty much just work with directors and senior VPs, which is a whole different way of communicating. So basically, if I send a message at this point now, it's either to leadership level or it's to large groups of people. And so it's a whole different skill set of communication and how you think about it. I put some stuff on the side here. You can see some of the other working skills, but put some stuff on the side here. Sam Walton's book is really interesting. It's all about how he started Walmart, what his mindset was. I started reading that book. Again, I like books, but I started reading the book because I wanted to apply to Walmart, but I finished the book because it was a really good book. So if you're at all interested in business or like how this big company started, or even Sam Walton, who's actually a really interesting person, I really recommend the book. It's very interesting. Because as you know, Walmart is Fortune 1, and it's really amazing how they got there. Something else just to brag on Walmart, something I think is really cool is Walmart's motto is save money, live better. And something that I can vouch for in the almost year I've been here is it's something the company really takes to heart. It's something they really want to do and make sure that more Americans have more money in their pockets, because they're the biggest company like in the US plus a lot of areas of the world. They're able to kind of get vendors to bring prices down and influence things in different ways. So like, for example, they were recently talking about how one of the basketballs we had I think it was $25 a basketball. It went up with COVID, and then it went down to $19. And so like things like that, that because we're Fortune 1, we're able to make a really big impact and share it with the customers. And I think it's really cool. Another thing Walmart does is they reward their, like, even the store employees. So there's some big articles that went out recently. Store managers get paid somewhere between $90,000 to $400,000 a year. And that's, as a store manager, you didn't even have to have a college degree. So just to brag on Walmart for a second, I think that they really do try to have a good impact. Okay, closing thoughts. My biggest thing I think I want to leave with you is just the importance of reflection over time. Right now, when you're in school cadence or even internship or co-op cadence, there are these clear breaks in your time. There's different semesters, there's summers, there's the end of the internship, there's what am I going to do this winter break or whatever it is. Once you get into the working world, there's not going to be a rhythm unless you create a rhythm. And so it doesn't even have to be like every 3 months I reflect. It's really up to you. It could be every new year. It could be every 6 months. It could be when my annual vow is. It doesn't really matter. But creating some rhythm that you're thinking about where you want to go, what your priorities are, and how you're going to get there is going to be important, because otherwise you blink and years go by. Defining your goals and priorities. I kind of hit on this, but like when I became a mom, my goals and priorities did change. And like your goals and priorities might change in different ways. It might not be because of that, but as they change, we're realizing that, like reflecting on that, and then making the changes that you want to make according to your life. Investing in learning opportunities, having that learning mindset, just with whatever method that is, even if that's meeting with mentors. Measuring your progress, just to see that you have made progress, and also to see maybe like I haven't made as much progress as I wanted in XYZ area. So how do I do that? And then taking time to celebrate wins, because sometimes you don't realize that you've made it further than you think. So variety of different pieces to kind of leave you with. I also put this big asterisk here. You have skills I don't. You're going to have knowledge that I don't. You're going to make impacts that I'm never going to make, because you all have your own skill sets. And so take what's helpful here. And if it's not helpful, like that's fine. Or if you want to reach out and talk, like I'm happy to do that. But these were attributes that I found helpful across my roles, is like flexibility and adaptability. You're going to go through a lot of change. Like I think in 5 years at JB Hunt, I had 11 different desks, which is just a minor, it's not a big deal. Like it's a minor thing. I think I had probably 7 different bosses. At Walmart, I've been here 1 year and I've been through 3 org changes and 2 bosses. Like in life, things are going to change. And if you can have some resilience and some adaptability in it and have a good attitude, it's going to really reflect well. A continuous improvement mindset with the asterisk, my funny story of like celebrating the wins along the way. Assumption of positive intent, really try to do it with your friends and students and coworkers and all of that, but it really makes a difference. Awareness that other people are growing. It's really easy to think like, oh, that person is hard to work with and I'm never going to like them. And then in 3 or 4 years, that person has also grown or changed or become this whole new thing that you didn't realize. So just remember that people are also on their own growth change journey, and you might cross paths with someone and end up really like being thankful that you did years from now that you would never have expected. Humility and ability to admit when you're wrong or you don't know everything, and then just like a growth and learning mindset. And that's going to look different in different ways. Like sometimes that might even just be as basic as like, I need to get a good cooking routine and exercise routine because it's going to help me at work. Like it doesn't always have to be, I got a whole new degree, but thinking about what you want. I put what's next. And I think for me, what's next is looking at this slide and just going like, hey, what does this look like? Like I said, we've got another baby coming in August. I'm really liking what I'm doing. I still feel like I'm learning and growing. I figure I'm going to probably want to stay in product. That's kind of where my head's at right now. But I think life changes and you change and you grow. And so we'll just keep seeing. But that's a little bit about me, a little bit about where I'm at. I'd love to hear from y'all or your perspectives, or if there's questions or if there's anything that would be helpful. Like, please help me make this useful for you in whatever way that looks like. That's all I got.
Yes, we're opening the floor up now to questions. Yeah, Miandra, thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a question that I wanted to ask you. So I'll start. So about the last week, I actually did a project with a classmate, and I'm a perfectionist myself, but I also found that he had the same mindset of perfectionism.
Yeah.
But at one point, And I know I've also read some of Chris Voss's works. At what point do you have to like, how do you reach a compromise for how perfect or how good you want this to be?
Yeah. That's a tough one. It always kind of depends. So like it kind of depends on what the benchmark is and who you're supporting it for. And then sometimes you kind of have to like wiggle out like where in the sand am I comfortable with? And it might even sometimes look like a hard conversation of like, hey, I think I'm comfortable with this. What is it that you're not comfortable with? Like I'm happy to like try to work with you, but it could also be that you need to set your own boundary of like, hey, I haven't slept in a day, like I really need to go home and sleep, and like where I'm comfortable with where it's at, so like I'm really open to you continuing, but I like need to set my own boundary here. But it's gonna look different in different ways, and so like your own situation, but I think being open with like where your standard is and asking questions and being curious about why that's not being the same, because you might be surprised, maybe they have a better idea than you. It's hard to know sometimes, like a lot of times people surprise you.
So we had one, we're getting questions in the chat as well. And
Great.
so, yeah, Hugo, our our treasurer has asked, um, what is the role I think out of your journey
Yeah.
that you found more challenging or most challenging?
Yeah. For me, management was the hardest, in the sense that I cared very deeply about my team. And so I think for me, learning how to like recharge and also set boundaries of like how much mental and like emotional energy can I spend caring about this and this, and also learning to find like the techniques that worked well for me. Like as I got better questions or as I found that discussion planner, like there were things that I learned along the way, and you kind of toughen up a little bit. Like it's hard because you really want to care about everyone and assume everyone's the best person ever, but you do have to like sometimes have hard conversations. Like I've been in um, not on my team, not on the team that I ended up leaving, but before that, in conversations that were performance improvement conversations where we had to say, this is what we need from you in this time frame, otherwise like it's being documented, and like battling with the ethics of that, but being like also at the same time like it affects the team when we have someone on the team that's not doing their job and is still here. It's affecting the morale and like everything else. And so I think management was the hardest for me, like because of that emotionally. And that's part of why, like, as I became a mom, I was like, right now, I don't personally have the space for it. Some people exceed in it and they just do great, and that's awesome. But for me, that was kind of difficult. It's not that I would never go back. I think I just need a little bit more mental space before I went back to it.
I like the part about the emotional investment of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Um, so the other questions was, yeah, how did you handle a
Hmm.
challenging situation of having an ineffective manager? I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you have some.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good question. I'll asterisk it with honestly saying, like, I think they're very effective for some people. Like, they have done well in other roles. I know you don't even know who I'm talking about, but just for their credit, like, they really do really well managing some types of people. But for me, I was not getting what I needed. And so I had to have a conversation. And before I could even have the conversation, I kind of had to, one, understand what I was feeling. Cause, like, sometimes you just feel off and you can't figure out what. Two, figure out of those feelings, what is it that I actually needed, which for me personally ended up being like, I need to meet once a week. I need to be able to tell you what I'm working on, like what I'm having difficulty with, and make sure that we're aligned on what those priorities are, because I'm feeling like I'm missing something that you care about, but I don't know what, and I'm not hearing from you enough. And then, like having that transparency, just, I mean, it was so easy because for them, they were like, great, if I meet with you more and hear XYZ, then you're a better employee. So thankfully, like it worked out really well. I've actually also had another manager that, as I'm like telling this story, I would actually say was ineffective. And that was a whole different game where it was kind of having the communication in a political space of knowing like, I'm having difficulty with this management. It's going to also make me look like a bad employee. So where do I need to ask for help and like speak up without like just bashing this person, but also still like showing that I care about being an employee. So there was a space that I was in for a while that my output was not very good. The people that were pouring into me were also not very good. And so I had to have some pretty tough conversations with people that thankfully I already had made that network and mentorship opportunity with, to be able to be like, hey, here's the deal, here's what I need, here's what I'm not getting. And so even though some of my outputs weren't great then, like people that had my back were able to know why.
Yeah, and yeah, I do have questions about that too. We'll circle back around that, but yes, we have a person that asks, do you have a role model in your personal circle or a public figure that you are inspired by? That's a very good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely in my personal circle, there's someone who works at JB Hunt. Her name's Mandy Robinson, if you look her up on LinkedIn, but she's excellent. I really appreciate her as like a woman leader, as someone who has poured into me, as someone who has also gone through the working mom life journey, which is a whole journey in and of itself. And someone that I really appreciate like her time pouring into me, but also as a more public figure. I don't know if y'all know Indra Noory. She was the CEO for Pepsi. She's got another great book. So if you are looking for a really cool storyline of someone who immigrated to the US like and made huge changes and just has like such an inspirational and like incredible outlook on life, like really loved her book. So I'll plug that here too.
Yeah, and I think more questions will be coming in, but
Yeah.
yes, just I think from the perspective I was also I'm speaking out for graduate students too. Like our managers are also our advisors sometimes, and sometimes yes, being on the same page for us yeah, it gets crucial. But just because you also have more meetings doesn't mean it's always going to be our questions will not all be answered straight away. So I guess I guess to have one question, it is besides being on the same page with your manager or advisors, of course, what are some, I guess, best practices and openly communicating with your senior supervisors?
Yeah. So I've talked a lot about assuming positive intent. I still believe in that, but I also believe in CYA. If you don't know that acronym, Google it. But it means like protect yourself, basically. But a lot of times when you meet with someone who's you're working for or over you or has a lot of influence in your career path, well-intentioned or not, sometimes people, you're not the only thing on their mind. And so they're going to forget conversations you had or things they asked of you or work that you are doing. And so I find it helpful for me to collect my thoughts before those meetings, write them down where I'm going to talk about like, and it doesn't have to be every detail, but like the high level, and then email it back to them afterward. And that way, hopefully they're great and nothing ever matters. And like, they're just kind of like, they either like it or they just think you're extra. It doesn't really matter. But no matter what, you have the paper trail now to show that. And similarly, like if you're feeling like you're not jiving with someone in the sense that you feel like they're not bought into what you're doing, it's okay to have pretty transparent conversations with like, hey, right now, 70% of my time is going to this and 25 is this, and actually only 5% is this. Is that the thought that you had? And if not, what is the thought that you had? And then you can have more open, transparent conversations about it. But sometimes like that alignment and then creating that paper trail, like I'm very big on paper trails, even when it's the best boss ever. And I told that even to people that worked for me. I'm like, hopefully I'm a good boss and hopefully everyone you have after me is a good boss, but documenting what your goals are for the year and if you hit them or not, and like what you did to grow yourself is important, because on that HR paper trail, you now can show here's what I did every year to grow and why I deserve this promotion or whatever.
So so when you say paper trail, it's also like documenting everything that you've done and also
Yeah,
what you're
yep.
supposed
So
to
like
do. Yeah.
email it back to people, like, save it places, like put it in your HR system, whatever it is it looks like.
Yeah.
So, do the best, do your best, assume people mean well, but also leave a leave a document trail that shows what you did and why you did it along the way. And then that way, if anyone comes poking back into it or someone ever gets frustrated, you can be like, look, I was pretty transparent with what was going on. Like, sorry, didn't mean to mess up if I really did mess up, but like also people knew what was going on.
Yeah. Because you're also documenting everything. And,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, so one question did pop up. Did you notice any similarities between working at JB Hunt and Walmart?
Yeah, I am sure I will notice more over time. Right now, it's really interesting. I think coming from Hunt, I was there for about 5 years. I'll be at Walmart almost one in June. Um, so I think right now I'm noticing a lot of differences. So in the sense that they're both from the same region, but the way that they hire and promote is a little different. Walmart is so much more international. So Hunt also has stuff in Canada and Mexico. So it's North America basically, but it's not as broad as where Walmart is. Everything is international. The scope is huge. So I think there are ways that Hunt is able to be more efficient in the sense that they're smaller. And so getting everyone on the same page is easier. But then there's also ways that Walmart is amazing with how much they're able to do with how many people are in scale. Um, so I think that's a big difference I've noticed. I think the way that people define roles is kind of different. Like I'll see similar titles that don't do similar things at the same or at these companies. Um, but I mean, there's always similarities. Like you're gonna find good people anywhere you work. There's gonna find people that like care about processes anywhere you work. But I think for me, honestly, I've seen a lot of differences. But I think that that'll probably change with time.
Right. So I think your lecture is really the way you have grown over the years are really inspirational. It might be Robinson for you, but then I really find it inspiration for me. Personally, you're like balancing out motherhood and as well as like balancing in your professional career. I mean, the way you have grown from like co-op to a manager level. So it's not just your knowledge, but the way you speak and the way you communicate is really, I mean, it was really great. I mean, like, I would really like to have your input on improving. I'm not a great communicator, so I really wanted to know like how you uh, increase. I mean, like learn and all. Yeah.
Well, one, reach out. Like I'm glad this was helpful because I don't want to waste any of your time. I know you all have valuable
No,
time here.
it was very valuable.
But yeah, no, I think it's so I have personally found so much of it is being able to read the people that you work with. Like if you can listen to what they actually care about, and there's a lot of cool tricks on this. I think it might have been Daniel Pink's book, but it might have been something different. But there's this way that you can map rooms. This is just kind of a side tangent, but I think it's interesting. So every time, so take a piece of paper, sometime you're in a, I don't know, meeting, and put a little dot for each person. And every time someone looks to someone for an answer, draw a line. And every time someone like asks someone a question, like draw like a bold line or something, like make it a little more obvious, and you'll start to see who has power in the room. And so like there's tricks like that where if you start to be able to read the room, or like the people that have issues or complaints, if you can listen to them and like really ask like what's going on there and like truly be curious about them, I have personally found that to be the most helpful because then people have a lot of buy-in and they have a lot more grace when like they don't agree with something. If you can actually understand the person and where they're coming from, um, and listen to care about them, I think I think that's kind of what I've found helpful.
It's really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help.
Yes, and yes, we have till 7 o'clock to answer our questions.
Good.
We have, yeah, we're getting a lot of good questions, I think, today.
Yeah.
How did you find the progress? Like, I guess the progress path, meaning maybe the career trajectory, but
Mm-hmm.
so which companies you worked had this
Like,
clearly? So
yeah. So like how do okay, so good question. So at Hunt, I intentionally tried to learn from people. So when I had like, so when I did the rotation program, I was one of 11 that was in that original cohort. We would meet with each other during each of the rotations just to learn what each other were working on. I think if you do that and listen to each other, you can learn a lot about the politics, a lot about leadership styles, a lot about what's good or bad about places. I was really intentional about looking for places that had good budget or like growth trajectory because like there are some teams that do really interesting work at any company, but that's not where the company wants to put their money. So one, go where the opportunity is if it lines up with you. Like you can make things work even if you're like, this is the perfect role for me. It's not where I want to be in the long term. That's okay. Like don't just only go for the right opportunity. Like, but be intentional about what you pick and what the pros and cons are of what you pick. So I did look for teams that were growing. I looked for teams that had opportunity. I looked for teams that if I made an impact, it would be noticed. And so I think that helped a lot with like being in the right place at the right time. I did a lot to learn about what was it that I was doing? How do I grow skills in it? And then what does it look like to go to the next stop? And so a lot of times that looked like putting 30 minutes on a lot of different people's calendars and intentionally going there with questions and building that relationship and asking them more about their job or learning. And so, and sometimes it meant taking on projects that were just like, here's a good project that's not really in my scope, but I'm interested in. Let me do it. And then now you have more influence and more network. So I think with that, you're able to kind of, if you're being intentional and like trying to understand the politics and trying to network, you can start to feel out where there's better budget, where there's more opportunity, where there might be gaps. And if you can like have a good attitude and help with those gaps, a lot of time that's going to help with your promotion cycle. You'll also learn like a lot of companies have rules. Like we pretty much don't promote unless it's been at least a year and a half, or we pretty much don't promote unless it's been whatever, or we don't create new director roles. You have to move to a new, like you have to find a director that's leaving and then apply for that position. So a lot of it's also learning that company and like what their politics are. So like at Walmart, I'm still learning some of the politics there. And then also knowing what you want. So like sensing out what you felt. So like I came from engineering, did engineering at first, then did product ownership on a data science team, then managed a team. Now I'm doing like a strategic product role. So when I'm looking at my next role, if I went more businessy, I'm getting progressively less technical, like in my little chart. But if I stayed product, then I'm kind of like in that middle between business and technical. Or if I went more analytical again, or something data science again, I would go back technical. So like that's something that I'm putting a lot of thought into is like, as I go to my next role, I think I want to stay more mid to technical. So then that helps guide me on who do I need to make networks with? What do I need to grow next in? So that when I look for my next role, I'm prepared for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation because I guess also like that kind of overlaps with the academic side of things because not only are you following the money, but also there's one of finding mentors too that opens doors, and also reaching out intentionally with what kind of networking and research interests that you want to indulge in. Indulge in.
Completely.
Yeah. So in that sense, there's that overlap, and that's what we also try to do here in Forums is to create that community where the opportunities to network with various contacts. Yes.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's huge. We do have we will leave a couple of more minutes to for other people to come up with any last minute questions. And of course, you'll make the slides available as well.
Yeah, happy to I'll send them to you.
Okay. And we'll take a minute to
well, thanks everyone for coming. Don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening too. Like happy to chat, and also I just hope you have a great evening.
And congrats on your second baby, incoming baby.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We're excited. I'm gonna be outnumbered. We've got a boy dog, and I've got a husband and a boy kid. Now another boy on the way. So here we are. Send me some pink.
Yes. Also, it'll be a girl, or actually, no, sorry.
No, another boy. Yeah. So it's all.
I'm
completely outnumbered.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's gonna be fun though. I'm excited.
Yeah. Someone in chat said
it's a wonderful. I mean, some of y'all probably are moms and dads, and it's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah, you got.
Well, thanks for the time. Thanks y'all for joining and helping ask questions that made it helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for everything. I will. I guess. I'll stop the recording here since we don't have any more questions.
Or that's when people ask the spicy questions.